gorzej.
Widziałeś? Ale widziałeś jak on napisał, czy czytałeś to?
Chcę zobaczyć, czy jest znajdę na...
Okej, więc ja mam ujęcie.
No i ja posłucham, no nie ma chyba. Ale na szczęście za mnie to tłumaczenie jakiegoś chłopaka z Warszawy.
Good morning, everyone. We are a little bit delayed. Today, plenary session is, I think, a little bit and slightly different from our discussion yesterday. This time we move from youth policy, from digitalization, from values and aspiration to more specific and perhaps more sensitive area. The presence of young people in politics, especially in the context of radicalization, migration and far-right extremism. This topic will also return later today in the presentation by Professor Małgorzata Michel, who will describe the radicalization of attitudes among young people. Now, however, we will look at this issue from a different perspective, through the British and migration context, and through research that is interesting and socially important. Our guests in this session are Professor Rafał Soborski and Dr. Anna Jochimek. Professor Rafał Soborski is Professor of International Politics at Richmond American University, London. His research focuses on the theory of ideology, globalization, social movements, and the contemporary far right. He is the author of important monographs on ideology in the global age and on the future of progressive social movements. Dr. Anna Jochimek is researcher affiliated with London Metropolitan University. Her work focuses on far-right extremism, online subcultures, and counter-radicalization in the United Kingdom. Dr. Jochimek is also an artist, and ethnographer, and combines ethnographic methods with artistic practice, which give her research a strongly interdisciplinary character. Well, I would like also add a personal note, if you don't mind. I must say that I feel personally connected with both of our speakers. During my research at London Metropolitan University, I met Anna. She told me about this project and I found it fascinating. And I remember thinking I really want to hear the whole story one day. And this is one of the reasons why I was so happy to invite both of you at our conference. During the same stay in London, I also consulted my own research project. It was a project on young people aspiration, values and scenarios for the future. So today's session brings together several threads. Now I would like to start this lecture and go on. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Just trying to get the slides on the screen. The timer is still 10 minutes. So welcome everyone. I'd like to start by thanking the organizers and particularly Dr. Remigiusz Schauer for organizing this fantastic conference. It's been very enlightening and also extremely well organized. So we are very happy to be here and thank you again. So yes, the title is Far-Right Extremism Among Young Polish Migrants in the Context of Migration in the case of the United Kingdom. But before we get to the heart of this topic, we need to provide some contextualization regarding this paradox of migrants joining anti-immigrant groups. The presentation, I have to mention, is part of the research project founded by ESRC and held at Metropolitan University Center for Global Diversities and Inequalities. And there are actually 3 of us in the project, but Michal Garapich on the right-hand side of this picture could not be here with us today, but we are representing the 3 of us. Before I move on, of course, this will be a short presentation from a long project, so if anyone is interested, these are the published research findings. We have a couple more in press, so if anyone is interested, please email us and we'll be very happy to send you one or more of these papers. Now let me start with the with a broader context, right? As you probably know, Poland's accession to the EU meant that around 1 million people moved to the UK from Poland. The peak was around 2016, 1 million Poles. Now the number is below 700,000. Numbers have declined due to Brexit, due to COVID pandemic, and also the economic downturn in Britain in recent years, combined with economic growth and stability in Poland. I have to say that what we're going to discuss is a very small fraction of the Polish minority in Britain. Studies show that in general, Poles have a positive attitude to diversity in Britain, to multiculturalism, but there is still evidence of radicalization in the sections of that ethnic group. And just within the framework of long-distance nationalism, so how migrants affect politics back home in their home country, in 2023 elections, 10% of Poles in the UK voted for Konfederacja. Compare this with just 7% in Poland. And in 2025, in the first round of Poland's presidential elections, around 30% voted for far-right candidates Braun and Mencen, and Nawrocki only came fourth. But there is more to this than just long-distance nationalism, a concept from Benedict Anderson. It's not just about migrants affecting politics in their home country. There is a whole range of organizations that act as transmitters of radicalization, and we group them into three categories. First of all, there are Polish organizations transplanted to Britain, usually brought to Britain by activists who had been active in Poland. This includes Konfederacja, but also Obóz Narodowo-Radykalny and Narodowe Odrodzenie Polski. So these are extreme right organizations building on pre-Second World War fascism. And you see some pictures here from campaigns in Britain and addressed both to Poles and to Britons. Then there are organizations set up by Poles in Britain, organizations that do not have any mother branches in Poland. So there is Patriae Fidelis, which is a Polish youth association, and you can see them marching in one of the British towns. There is Ogniwo, Polskie Dywizjony Lotnicze, Husaria Manchester, and Defenders of Polish Graves. Polish graves in British cemeteries function almost as Polonized land. This refers to the history of Polish post-Second World War emigration to Britain associated with this military ethos. And some Polish activists, they do not have to be on the far right, but there is this far right angle to it as well, take care of those graves. One jokingly said that it's really about cleaning Polish graves, but the name Cleaners of Polish graves would not sound good, hence Defenders of Polish Graves. And here we have one example that we mention. I mean, this guy is not young, but he's useful to mention in the context of this conference because he socializes future generations of patriots. He's one of the many activists who do that, bringing his children to one of those cemeteries of significance to the Polish minority. And there is a quote from him. I won't read all the quotes because that would take too much time, but basically he says, okay, there is Halloween and he has no problem with that, but the day after, kids have to go with him to the graves. And then there are also British groups, British parties reaching out to Polish immigrants. And that's a bit of a paradox, of course, because these are anti-immigrant groups like Britain First, like English Defence League, like in the past British National Party, like National Action, which is an extreme right organization now proscribed, trying to appeal to Polish migrants, to recruit Polish migrants, with Poles sometimes being even the party's candidates. So see here from the most recent local elections a Polish member and candidate of Reform UK. And you see on those pictures this transnationalization of the British-Polish far right. So the top pictures actually show British activists in Poland. You have the British Britain First party on the left-hand side, the leaders attending the Polish Independence March in Warsaw. Tommy Robinson, the founder of the now defunct English Defence League, also at the same event. And then below you see the Polish section of the English Defence League. Now, in terms of how we proceeded with our research, we followed this principle that you have to study the where and when of the far right. And this was the starting point, followed by interviews with people we met in those spaces. So community events, right? They do not have to have political character. Certainly they are not overall across the board far right, but there will be stalls with some organizations presenting this kind of material. Visits of radicals from Poland. You may have heard about Dominik Tarczyński being banned from entering Britain very recently, and there was a lot of fuss around it, I think especially in Britain actually. Political demonstrations, I mentioned Independence March in Warsaw, political conferences, Reform UK already mentioned, commemoration rituals broadly around Polish history but with a political angle. We mentioned cemeteries, but also monuments commemorating Polish heroism during the Second World War. And then, and these are especially spaces where you find a lot of young people. There are MMA boxing galas, music concerts, Polish nationalist rappers gigs in Britain. There are also religious ceremonies or religious events, and we studied the Warriors of Mary. Not explicitly political, but again with some elements of political right-wing activism present. And online spaces, of course, we've done a lot of online ethnography. Now, very briefly about the data, we've conducted 75 in-depth interviews with both Poles and Brits, long narrative, biographical, unstructured interviews exploring migration, radicalization trajectories. And we focused also on comparing the previous generations of migrants with much younger generations of migrants, and there are some interesting conclusions from that. Interviews were conducted in Britain and in Poland, and there was a whole range of respondents. We treat the far right as a broad spectrum, so you may have members of Konfederacja, but also neo-Nazi structures on the extreme end of the spectrum. There are also members of neo-pagan networks, far-right influencers, and so on. Now, if I was to offer a sociological, socioeconomic profile of these interviewees, it would be very difficult to come to some generalizing conclusions. Aside from, I guess, gender, they are predominantly male, and I think this reflects the character of the far right today. In 75 respondents, we had 7 women. Age, and increasingly it's young people, and I want to highlight this, that really due to the misogynistic character of far-right ideologies, Polish teenage boys and young men are particularly vulnerable, and Anna is going to talk about this more. Financial status, well, all categories, but particularly self-employed young men who are sort of more resilient to bad publicity that they might result. There would be no implications from their employees. And, well, they are committed to a broadly similar set of ideas, even if they act separately. Now, before we'll have conclusions, of course, but some key findings, and I'll try to be concise here. Probably our most important one is that far-right radicalization is not a direct import in Poland. In the huge majority of cases, our interviewees got radicalized in Britain. And the younger they are, the more interested they are in British politics. Some of them do not really know much about politics, about Polish politics. There is this generational divide here. This is part of what we call integration through racism. Many of those young Polish males feel they have something more to prove. Their whiteness and their belonging may be questioned, and they try to position themselves as close as possible to those they see as being dominant, namely the white British. And their ideas revolve increasingly around transnational categories: whiteness, Europeanness, Christianity, rather than traditional Polish nationalism. And yes, the last two bullet points summarize this generational difference. Those migrants who are now in their 50s, who arrived in post-2004, their 40s or 50s, admired British prosperity at the time and were quite deferential to British far-right figures. They wanted recognition. The young migrants today are far more confident. They actually quite often told us things indicating that they feel Poland is superior, and that, and maybe I'll actually show you the quote to illustrate this. This is Marcin. The numbers in brackets indicate the age of the respondents when they got sentenced, because we'll be talking, Anna, especially about a lot of convicted activists. And I won't read this whole thing, but you know, him saying that if it weren't for the Poles, England would have perished, and he is not there to support Polish nationalism at those demonstrations, but because Polish nationalism is doing well, but English nationalism, and then, you know, he believes he has a lot of support from the Brits. And I've taken too much time, so I'll be quick to pass the mic to Anna.
Yeah, so it goes without saying that the biggest radicalization for the space is a space of online. We all, I think, know that, are aware of that. The far right was very quick to exploit the internet for propaganda and recruitment, and obviously the young people were the most vulnerable and most receptive to the radicalization. Accordingly to the statistics, which I think is important to mention, around 2002-03, only 3% of the people who were convicted of far-right terrorism were at the age of below 18. These days, 2024, 2025, it's almost 19%. So throughout this 20 years, the numbers of young people being sentenced for far-right terrorism peaked. Throughout our research, we looked at the platforms like X, Telegram, Discord, Odyssey, Omegle, and other encrypted messaging apps. Obviously, there is also a dark web, but we have to also highlight that those mainstream, even if encrypted, but still mainstream online platforms are the main means of radicalization and spaces where young people get radicalized. So, obviously, when there is a problem, the government is seeking to find a solution. And one of the solutions I would like to mention here, because I think it's quite important, is the work of Prevent. Prevent, for those who does not know, is the UK government program, basically, a part of counter-terrorism strategy in the UK, and it's aimed at stopping radicalization of vulnerable people, mainly young people. And what they came with is they were like, okay, if young people are online, they are into gaming, we need to kind of create something that is gamified. So they created this gamified application called Pathways that would present the ways the young people are being drawn to extremism and how they can like resist of being radicalized. And one of the kind of bad characters was Amelia, this little girl with like alternative looking girl with purple hair. And what happened is that far right was very quickly to hijack this figure. And by using AI, they created the whole propaganda around how Amelia, this young and, you know, super powerful and edgy girl, is saying, yeah, the Britain is sinking and we need to stop illegal immigration and we have to take care of us, of little women and future mothers of your offspring, etc., etc. Obviously, like, she's super sexy, attractive, and went viral. So Prevent had to take down the application and it's not accessible anymore because it went wrong. But what happened later, it kind of moved from online sphere back to reality. And on a recent Tommy Robinson march that happened less than a month ago, there were already women dressing up as Amelia and cosplaying basically this character, which became quite sinister. And there were not only young women, there were also like men and older women that started to basically identify with this teenage girl. Weirdly enough, the second from left picture is also generated by AI. So it's not anymore the fake AI, it resembles reality. So it's like a loop of the thing that happens online. But yeah, among the teenagers that has been sentenced under Terrorism Act, we do have 8 Polish individuals, and we will kind of try to take you through the couple of cases. So we'll start with like 2019, when 3 Polish teenagers were sentenced under Terrorism Act. They had no or minimal engagement with Polish politics. The profile, they all arrived to the UK as children and they were convicted at very early age, like 18, 19 years old. More likely, they do not have a British citizenship, so we have to take in consideration fact that after serving the jail time, they would be quite possibly deported. I'm saying quite possibly because obviously those are very difficult cases and we do not have a full access to the stories of those individuals. We will have a few of the examples I will discuss that we know a bit more about. So we also have to remember that when it comes to those type of radicalization, it occurs primarily through exposure to British or transnational far-right environment, no links to Polish politics, and the cases that you can see on the pictures, those are people who were involved in national action, Sonarchy division, so neo-Nazi far-right networks, very much present online. Not all of them knew themselves in real life. They were mainly like online friends. And here is the example of like what they would post online. So highly misogynistic and sexist attitudes towards women was one of the very disturbing findings. Obviously, like racist attitudes, and some of them would, you can see, participate in national action rallies. Yeah, so now I will take you through the 2 profiles of 2 different modes of radicalization. I have to also like mention that when it comes to individuals we actually interviewed, we don't use their real names. We kind of like anonymize them. We don't anonymize names of the people with whom we did not speak with, and their profiles are accessible online. So when it comes to Emmanuel, that's the individual that we interviewed, and he represents a bit more like an old-fashioned way of radicalization. So he migrated to England at the age of 18. He already like experienced some hardship at school in Poland. So he had a little bit of the PTSD, like avoidance and social phobia, a bit depressed. And after moving to the UK, it kind of like deepened. So there were reports of him feeling lonely and being in this very precarious economic position, poor working conditions, and all of a sudden in the bar he meets a British activist, a member of EDL, who starts to explain the world to him and giving him a justification why he's being in this position. And then he dives into online and like gets into this Facebook meme loop and stuff like that. And so the radical politics provided him with a sense of purpose, identity, meaning, and mission. So he started to express discriminatory attitudes towards his co-workers and adopting racist language and increasingly viewing society through ethnic hierarchies. So he started to develop a strong fascination with extremist actors. For the time being, he was a member of Britain First. And to the point when he started to ordering like explosive materials, and at that point he came to the radar of the terrorism officers, and he was sentenced for 4 years. And after serving a jail time, he was deported to Poland and fell into systemic gap because we are finding ourselves in the situation that basically a person with a terrorist conviction got deported to Poland and is not known to the British security services as a terrorist because like his files are clean here. Yeah, sorry, Polish, yeah. And when it comes to Gabriel, it's a slightly different situation because Gabriel represents a digital ecosystem. So he moved to the UK at the age of 6, barely speaks Polish, a little bit maybe, does not hold a UK passport either. From the very 8 years, he was diagnosed with autism, the Asperger's syndrome, and he started to glorify violence through identification with perpetrators and terrorist attackers like Tarrant or Breivik, all like creators like Gypsy Crusader, Code Comedy, TJ. He was active on Omegle, Discord, Telegram, and was very much influenced by the transnational nature of far-right and neo-Nazism. And he ended up being convicted for 12 years in prison under free on license. So basically he will spend the next over 10 years in prison for his online terrorism. But why? Because of the number of the offenses he got, including holding manuals for terrorism, but also for printing a 3D gun, which it became one of the, I think, fashionable things right now to do, if I may use this this term, because printing 3D guns is kind of a new strand for young people, and far-right radicalization increasingly intersects with digital DIY weapon cultures, including interest in pop manuals, 3D guns files, and tactics of that sort. So in the past 2 years, 3 Polish people got sentenced under Firearms Act. Them along with Terrorist Act. So 2 of them were sentenced for terrorism and printing 3D guns, and 1 only for printing 3D guns. Apparently, it's does it? So apparently that's something people do more than we kind of are aware of, and we think that's very important to also mention that. So recent UK terrorism convictions involve Polish nationals like Gabriel Budasz that we've mentioned, Robert Adamski, and here Igor Ciesielski. All of them are barely above 20, so between 21 and 26 years old. Interestingly, it took us a little bit to realize that Igor actually was sentenced under Firearms Act, and it was only recently when we realized that he also were praising Hitler and having those like neo-Nazi leanings. So it goes hand in hand, basically.
Okay, I'll go through our conclusions briefly. First of all, there is still in research of the far right this assumption that immigrants and the far right are diametrically opposed categories, right? And there is this methodological nationalism focusing on realities. Is between countries, right? So there is just focus on the Polish far right or the French far right, and maybe comparisons between two separate cases. But there is no sufficient analysis of what happens in between, which is of course of growing significance in the context of globalization, in the context of virtual communication, circulation of migrant remittances, and so on. As for the, and that's what we're trying to address, as for the radicalization of Polish immigrants, it cannot be treated separately from their British counterparts. It really has quite similar dynamics and characteristics, but it seems that their in-between positionality as minority, but a white minority in Britain, as I said earlier, plays an important part. Their whiteness may be questioned, as one scholar said. They are white, but not quite. They may have something to prove, and I mentioned this strategy of integration through racism. What clearly probably won't be surprising, but the extent of that became clear for us during the research, is that there is strong correlation between gender-based violence and far-right activism. And then in terms of policies, they should really focus on online radicalization risks, critical media literacy, and resilience to disinformation, because most of radicalization happens online, right? We had one case where it was mediated through a British person met in real world in a bar, right? But even then it was reinforced mainly by activity online, by Emmanuel, that first case that Anna discussed. There is also a growing need, and this is extremely significant, and Anna alluded to this already, to improve cooperation between British and Polish services. Generally, Britain tends to deport Polish citizens who had spent time in prisons. After they served their time, they are deported to Poland. And they fall into this systemic gap because they are no longer under the supervision of the Brits, and there is no support system for them in Poland. And we know from our interviewees in that situation that when they arrive in Poland, there is an immediate interest from far-right groups and also parties like Konfederacja, who try to turn them into martyrs and present Britain as this mad country with political correctness run amok, in which there is no freedom of speech and so on, the typical far-right themes. There is also one point that we didn't include here, but there should be more attention given from the British perspective to whether banning of those radicals from Poland really is effective, whether it's not counterproductive, because they end up connecting with their audience online, on screens, and present this as another evidence of lack of freedom of speech, and actually, this elevates their position quite often. So, I don't have a ready-made solution, but I think greater attention should be paid to this. Now, we don't have more time, so I'd like to just jump into this final thing, and this will be followed by the screening of the documentary Dead Boy on the left-hand side. This was, I have to say, one of the brighter moments during our research, when we found, and that's a longer story, so we can perhaps talk after the screening, this former neo-Nazi on the left-hand side who had undergone a process of de-radicalization driven from within, so it wasn't institutionally mediated. As you will see, he interprets this as the act of God. He's now, he's not Catholic, he's a newborn Christian. And he speaks with Toby, who sits opposite, who is a Roma guy who had left Poland as a child in the 1990s due to persecution here. His family got asylum in Britain at that time. And well, we don't have time, so I'm going to stop here. But I hope you will find the documentary of interest, and we'll be very happy to answer questions after the documentary, both about it and about our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
So hi, my name is Toby G. MBE, but my real name is Tobiasz Zobar Górniak Romano Ciabo Galiciaco. I agreed to be part of this project because I've experienced a lot of racism, violence and abuse, and something I wanted to try to understand why, what caused them to be this way. Personally, I don't know much about the person I'm about to meet today, but all I know, he's an ex-neo-Nazi, so I'm really interested to find out more about him today in a discussion.
My name is Mirek and I am from Poland, but I'm living in the UK 19 years. So I've got family, I've got wife, I've got 3 children and a dog. I will have meeting with Toby. He is Polish gypsy with hope that it can be useful for something for, I don't know. I don't know what to expect. Like I'm just looking forward. My background, I think that's the reason why I'm here. Is like I am former skinhead and neo-Nazi, so I hated units like gypsy people. We beat them, so very violent.
Thank you very much for this really inspiring and stirring and touching mind material, and also your lecture. And now I would like to open the discussion. Please feel free to ask questions, share your thoughts, or offer a different perspective. So question, comments, reflection. Okay. I ask Eva for help.
Przede wszystkim chciałem Państwu pogratulować tego filmu. Rzeczywiście jest to film, który powinien być pokazywany rzeczywiście w różnych ośrodkach poprawczych takich. I myślę, że może kiedyś uda mi się Państwa namówić, żebyśmy zrobili wspólnie projekt, jakiś taki obóz integracyjny, bo dołożyłbym te takonie, gdzie ci Romowie rzeczywiście byliby zakochani. Oni wspominają o tych swoich korzeniach, a często nie mają możliwości. Ja jestem bardzo, tak powiedzmy, otwarty na takie kontakty z Romami. Kilkukrotnie, tu nie wiem, czy Państwu mówiłem, brałem udział w takich konferencjach z Unii Europejskiej, z taką Małgosią Różycką i tak dalej. I oni do dzisiaj mają w głowie z tyłu ten stukot taborów, kopyt końskich i myślę, że trzeba im przywrócić tą tożsamość i zrobić, żeby w jakiś sposób odpłacić im za nasze grzechy po prostu. A z drugiej strony, jak widziałem ich, powiedzmy, najpierw takich wolnych z tymi taborami, a później jak zostali na siłę w latach 70. w Polsce do takich mieszkań po byłych PGR-ach, to czułem się, że to samo zrobili Amerykanie z Indianami. Także przepraszam.
Dziękujemy bardzo. Ja pozwolę sobie ze względu na obecność gości zagranicznych, Aliny i Howarda, przejść na angielski. Thank you for your statement. Okay. Do you want to?
No, thank you very much for your warm comments. Yeah, we appreciate them.
Maybe Howard, Alina, maybe you have a question. Yeah, okay. Oh.
Just two things, actually. I mean, I presume people in this room know who Tommy Robinson is. And there's a big debate at the moment about his real name, as you know, is Stephen Yaxley Lennon. And he's generally reported in the media as being Tommy Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon. But the argument in the media is that fuels his street, working class. Tommy is very deliberate around Tommy guns and British nationalism and so on. So the argument is to say Stephen Yaxley Lennon, who tries to go under the name of Tommy Robinson. And I'm not accusing you of fueling that, but I think that perhaps that's worth a thought. The question was really about ethics. I mean, I thought your presentation was fantastic, and I took a lot of notes, very, very interesting, beautifully presented, everything about it. But having been the chair of my faculty ethics committee and thinking of the ESRC and the, you know, the journal requirements now about ethical consent, and it's getting tougher and tougher and tougher to get through those ethical hoops. And you, in your methodology, you said that you've interviewed some pretty dodgy characters. And I've just wondered whether you want to say anything about how you managed to persuade an ethics committee that you could do this work safely, sensibly, and with, you know, without risk and all the rest. Yeah, that's the question.
Answer this. I think you have.
Shall I? Okay, that's a tricky one. No, but being completely serious, we have to remember that we didn't do this project in isolation. There is a huge body of work that has been done before us. We can name like Kathleen Blee, who was a pioneer in the researching far right, Hilary Pinklington, Joel Busher, Agnieszka Pasieka, amongst many others who've done this work before us. We absolutely learn from their experience, passing the ethical approval at university along with the British Academy guidelines and ECRC requirements was a long process. I think it took us like 6 months to pass to get a formal approval. Later on down the line, obviously, there were plenty of ethical issues because when you are immersed in the field, things are happening because we are like immersed in reality. So obviously, we had to use the best judgment. We had advisory board as well on the side that would advise us in the more critical situations. Yeah, we had ongoing collaboration with 5 Matters. This is radicalization monitoring NGOs in the UK that would also like advise us and work somehow as a umbrella shelter just in case something would go wrong, because there were like reputational risk, physical risks, etc., etc., etc. There were some principles we had. One of the most important ones that I would like to highlight was non-dehumanization principle, which means that we treat our respondents equally. Typically, when I would approach them, I would just say, who am I? Why am I reaching out to them? What we do as a team? What's the research about? There would be full transparency. And in all fairness, I would treat them as an expert in their field. So we would have very like upfront attitude towards them, and it paid off. Majority of them would engage with us. They would rarely disengage or would be upset and stuff like that. They wanted to speak with us. And we would always sign a contract with them that would secure their anonymity. There was also clausule, like if they would tell us that they are planning actually to do something that would harm others, we were entitled to inform the services. So there were like the whole system that would protect us and them as well. Although we don't like to use the term them and the other. Those were our interviewees, and we would respect them as human beings, because the one thing we didn't want to do is to dehumanize others as they do as a part of their ideology. So one more thing I also might mention is that it wasn't that scary that we anticipated at the beginning, because when you think about researching far right and seeing the media headlines saying that people are dangerous and there is plenty of violence, and I did at least half of the interviews, and I'm a woman, along with my colleagues. The second in number, I think, was like PI Michał Garapich, who is a fine ethnographer, and he has done plenty of interviews as well. Some interviews were done by Rafał as well. So we were anticipating that people might be like aggressive towards us, that there might be a case of stalking or even like sexual abuse towards me as a woman. It was not the case. It was not the case, and it also aligns with the reporting on this from other female researchers in the field. So it turned out that it was more of an emotional burden on us as a researchers, and trying to kind of avoid being paranoid about certain encounters or anticipating things that might happen but never actually happened. So maybe we were lucky, and or maybe it is like that. Maybe it is like that. If you respect others, they also kind of give you respect back.
If I can add to this just very briefly, even though this was an excellent summary, I think the greatest challenge we faced, and particularly Anna and Michał, as they did the majority of interviews, was, you know, this dilemma of how to avoid nodding, right? Because when you have a conversation with another person and it lasts for hours, you know, it's difficult to switch off empathy. I mean, empathy is part of the process, but how not to become sympathetic in a way, you know, and you are exposed to so much racism, Islamophobia, homophobia, misogyny, and so on. You have to, this was the most difficult aspect, how to shake it off, you know, after those hours long interviews. But as Anna said, we anticipated threats, we anticipated at least low-level violence. Nothing of that kind actually happened. I hope we've answered.
Any more questions? Oh, yeah. First, okay.
Well, very much connected to this topic. Would you care to a little bit explain also more how exactly you recruited them? So and what there were these contracts with about your rights, but were there also some kind of incentives or what motivated them to participate in the study? And how you recruited?
There were no incentives, right? So there was no compensation for that at all. No. So they were just willing to talk. I think they were willing to share their stories. That was an ethical dilemma in itself. To what extent we may have provided some platform, right, for those people. But then we think. It is important to know, right, about them. If you don't speak to them, what kind of knowledge can you acquire? And that knowledge is then, we believe, useful in policy making, right? So, have I sort of answered? That was online, online, but also through those events. So, you know, it was ethnography first, and then the interviews were really the final stage of the research, and actually maybe not final because it then went on. We maintained contacts with some of our interviewees, and we had some feedback. We spoke with some of them as things developed, right? But the first thing was participating. We participated in Reform UK conference. We participated in those celebrations. We participated in MMA galas, music concerts, and so on. So we found people there as well as, of course, online.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Anna and Rafał. And I would like to ask about this, what was the main topic of your presentation, this overlapping of migration and far-right movement. And I would like to ask, is is it like a British phenomenon? Do you know, is it happening everywhere, anywhere else in Europe? Like I was trying to imagine Poland and, I don't know, Ukrainian migrant joining Konfederacja Korony Polskiej or something like that. And my imagination is not so good to do so. So is it British occurrence or something?
We think it's not exclusively British, but there is a particularly fertile ground in Britain. So to mention some other cases, you have Russian speaking Russians, well, in Germany, to whom the AfD is trying to appeal. So there is some participation there. In Spain, Vox party, the populist right party, tries to engage Latino voters, right, and contrast them in the discourse with the Moroccans, right? So there is some kind of flirting there. So it's not just Britain, but I think there is a very interesting connection due to the post-Second World War past and also, well, Second World War military effort of Poles that particularly older generation in Britain appreciates, but that has been mobilized by both sides, both by the Brits and by the Poles involved, right? It's this mythology of European Western Christian connection, fight for heteronormative, nationalist, traditional values, bringing them together. In Britain, it's not just about Poles. Some on the far right, including Robinson, whose real name is different. He is now extremely pro-Israeli, and both Israelis as well as Iranians attend his rallies, and also engaging with some people from Sri Lanka. So it's not just the Poles, but I think Poles are very useful as tokens for those parties also and groups to soften their image, to say, well, we have those immigrants amongst our ranks. That means we are not xenophobic, right? We are opposing something that's objectively a threat rather than being prejudiced. And then there is, I guess, this power-light nostalgia, Enoch Powell, about Britain that is no more. Right, that's imagined as white, traditional, conservative, and Poles symbolize this to some extent. I mean, there is not just within the British far right, but this idea of Poland as a country that's the last bastion of normality, as they see it, right? As a country that still remains predominantly white, that remains traditional, that is protecting its borders, and you'll see this kind of content circulating in the cyberspace in the posts of far right influencers. So in summary, in response to your question, it's not exclusively Poles, but based on our research and based on what we've seen from colleagues we worked with. There is no comparable case as far as the intensity of cooperation is concerned. There are migrants, including Estonian migrants in Finland, for instance, who support far-right parties, but there is less of a direct engagement, right, within such groups. So I think it's quite exceptional in terms of the degree of engagement.
We must close this session. Okay, short question. Okay.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for the movie. I had actually two questions. One about how this movie actually came to be created, and was it directly connected to your research? What was the story behind this movie? I find it very important, and maybe you could also say it's possible to use it as maybe educational resource. And you also talked about policy making. And you said that your research could be useful for policy making could you say more in any ideas in this regard? Thank you.
Of course, it would not have happened without Anna, and
Anna is
I
producer.
think, yes, she should.
Okay, so maybe I will start with the second question. We just released a report in English. It will be released in Polish as well for the British and Polish governmental bodies. So we would hope that it will get some traction. To answer very shortly on this question. And second one, when it comes to the films, the idea for the film is appeared at a certain level of our research, where we're actually, I think, looking for hope, if that makes sense, because you have to kind of sustain yourself when you do the research of that sort. And one of the reasons, we already kind of started to meet up with people who started to regret what they've done in the past. I'm not saying that they were fully radicalized, on the left-wing side and, all chirpy and that stuff. No, not at all. But they were not neo-Nazis anymore. So the story with Mirek, just to put it, I will try to make it very brief. He started with me meeting with some quite hardcore neo-Nazi in a small town, a seaside town in England. I was absolutely terrified when I've met this guy, because he had a signs on blood on his shirt, and within first 3 minutes he told me that he was in prison 16 times. And he had this eagle on his head, palm of his head tattooed, and a swastika on the shoulder blade. And he was massive, basically a square guy. I was like, maybe I should just run away. But something told me just to stay. Why not? I'm there. Yeah. So we went for pizza. And, he told me about his horrible, horrible life story when he was kicked out by his family at the age of 13, living in a basement, having this swastika tattooed in the basement as well, but by his colleague, involved in some gangs and violence and stuff like that. When he moved to the UK, he was still very deeply in the neo-Nazi network. He met Andras Breivik before he, it was Breivik, yeah, before he committed this horrible crime later on. And towards the end, he started saying that he has those suicidal thoughts and he regrets he cannot sleep at night. And he knows that he has done horrible stuff in the past. And then I told the story about this encounter to my colleague Michał, who decided to give him a call. And that's the power of the teamwork, because I didn't ask a question about his religion. And then Michał asked this question, and he said that he is a person who kind of search, and he sometimes visits this Pentecostal church gatherings, and that he's not the only former neo-Nazi in this network. And we were so surprised. And then we went for one of those gatherings, and that's how we've met Mirek. Mirek and my respondent did not know themselves. And the first guy I've mentioned, he kind of backed off. It was a little bit I think, too spiritual for him. But he put that on a track. And that's how we've met Mirek. And the characteristic of the Pentecostal church is that people give testimonies of their past and the change. So there were a few former neo-Nazis and skinheads that would give already this type of testaments. So that's how we've met Mirek. And we started to sustain a relation with him. And then Michał in the past was doing some studies with Roma people, and he had this idea that maybe we could do something like that. And we were like, okay, so let's make a movie. Let's make it like that. And we started a conversation, etc., etc. A few months later, we filmed the piece you watched today. Sorry.
For me, it was really frightening one more time, because of discovering mechanism of building hateness in people's mind, and it has happened now. Yeah, and Pope Leo, probably in Monaco, said such interesting sentence that the war is starting not in the using guns, but in our minds. And probably it's defining this situation here. Sorry that I'm pathetic now, but I'm also a preacher, as you know. So, okay, thank you very much. And we must close this session. And now we have coffee break. Szanowni Państwo, pozwólcie Państwo, ponieważ kończymy naszą transmisję już w ogóle tych części plenarnych, że podziękuję serdecznie wszystkim partnerom konferencji, partnerom i patronom. Szczególnie chciałem podziękować sekcji socjologii młodzieży i edukacji Polskiego Towarzystwa Socjologicznego. I również, proszę Państwa, chciałem w tym miejscu podziękować bardzo szczególnie telewizji uniwersyteckiej UNIWIZJA za przekaz transmisyjny. Przepraszam, to jest w sumie chyba tautologia, za przekaz wel transmisję. Bardzo dziękuję wszystkim Państwu. Szczególne podziękowania składam na ręce dyrektor Centrum Medialnego i Interaktywności, pani Beacie Mikołajewskiej-Wieczorek, a także całemu zespołowi misyjno-realizacyjnemu za to, że byliście panowie tutaj z nami cały czas, pilnowaliście wszystkiego, żeby to się udało. Ja teraz za chwilę wcisnę taki guzik z napisem brawa. Howard and Alina, I press the button with name applause, okay, for the University Television. Okay, so I press the button and thank you. Dziękujemy, zapraszamy na przerwę.
Discovery Houston, press to ATO.
Liftoff of mission 41D, the first flight of the Orbit Discovery, and the shuttle has cleared the tower.
3, 2, 1, 0, 0.
Discovery, go and throttle up. Discovery's 4 computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.